the Ecom Crew podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's awesome having you guys. Just put out this survey that I'm excited to talk to you about today, and we'll get into that in just a minute. But maybe let's talk a little bit about how this survey came to be, what your company does, and how you came to be able to talk to 42 different aggregators to pull all this data together that's going to be talked about in this episode.
Yeah, sure. So I'm co-founder of one of the co-founders of Fortunet, which is it's an investment banking firm. We help medium and large Amazon sellers with their exit, with the sale of their business. So we've been in that space since 2018, right? Right before
You were doing it before it
Thrasio
was cool.
started it. Oh, yeah, exactly. It just started to be cool, and so we've been very active since then. We're a team of 40 people just doing that, and we felt that there were many misconceptions in our industry regarding what buyers want, and so we've had, for example, sellers saying to us, I have 6 months to until I sell my business. By then, I will develop a Shopify, account and a DTC business so that my multiple will be higher. And we saw that this wasn't necessarily true. So we wanted to check with the buyers what they really want. So we asked them. We asked 42 aggregators a few questions about the categories that they want, or the categories that they hate, how many SKUs, what's the structure that they prefer, and they replied. They were very responsive, and some of the questions were quite surprising.
Yeah, I find this to be really fascinating. So what we're going to be doing today is covering the executive summary page today. There's 13 bullet points we'll be talking about. If you're interested in getting this report yourself, which I highly recommend you go do, you can go to fortunet.net and grab that, and that's spelled Fortunet.net. And then down at the bottom of the website in the footer is a link to survey report. You plop in your email address. You can download the report immediately. Again, we're going to cover the executive summary page, but there are, I don't know, like 30 pages to this report, lots of cool graphs and breakdowns of this information. We were kind of talking before getting on this podcast. I think looking at this type of data can really help you decide what you want your next business to be, and or how you might mold your current business to position it for the best possible sale in 12 or 18, 24 months, whatever it might be. So without further ado, I'll start firing these off, and we can talk about each of these 13 bullet points. The first one is that the most popular categories amongst these aggregators include, number one is home and garden, over 88%, pet supplies, over 78%, baby products, which this one surprises me, 67%, outdoors is 64%, and the fifth one is health and personal care, 64%. And I assume those numbers mean that amongst the 42 people polled, 88% of them, et cetera, were interested in these categories.
Yeah, we asked them to choose three of them, three categories they chose, and these were the categories that they liked the most. What's interesting to look at is the next question, and then I'll tell you, when we interviewed him and we try to understand why do they prefer those and why do they exclude others, and there's an explanation behind it. So if you look at the next question, and maybe I'll read it a second. When we ask them what do they exclude, what do they don't buy, they said apparel. 52% won't buy a business of any apparel of any kind. Electronics is something that they stay away from, 44%. Supplements, food, or any fashion product. And so what was interesting is, when you ask yourself why do they exclude, we can kind of divide it to two main categories that they exclude. they don't like generally categories where they have to launch products all the new listings all the time. So if you look at electronics, if you're selling, for example, I don't know, the new iPhone, or even accessories to electronics, like you're selling the cover of the iPhone, you're paying millions for a listing that has accumulated reviews, and then in 2 years you'll have to launch a new one. So whatever you paid for, yes, I mean the brand has its strength, and it's easier to launch, but still you have to work and launch all the time, and that, that requires some design capabilities sometimes, and just more work. What they prefer is evergreen products, basically
Yeah.
products that they buy with the reviews, they stay forever. You buy home products, they, most of them, stay forever. Pet product, that's not something that that you'll have to renew every once in a while. Baby products, it depends which products. Outdoor and health, that's what they explained when we asked about the categories. And the second part that they exclude is the kind of food and supplements. When we asked them why, it's interesting. They had two answers. Maybe you can guess. You can guess why. Why don't they buy supplements and food?
Well, I think it's probably because it's like the most competitive thing out there, and the negative nastiness is so overwhelming in terms of black hat competitor stuff that it can sink your business. I mean, it's I know several people who are in supplements. It can be incredibly lucrative. I think it's like dealing with the devil. It's like it can be
Right.
incredibly lucrative, but at the same time, it's kind of binary. So like when the crap hits the fan, there's also a lot of legal stuff around it. It can be very
Right.
difficult
That
dealing
was,
with
so
the
you hit
FDA.
it too. Wow.
Hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean the FDA
You
and and everything that kind of goes around that can be quite difficult, and then you can get sued very easily for any type of react. I mean, when you're talking about millions of people, like there's always an outlier, right? Somebody has some
Right.
reaction to something that everyone else, the other 999,999, are fine with. You can never know that in any type of trial or any type of thing like that. And next thing you know, you're dealing with some 7-figure lawsuit, and doesn't matter how much insurance you have, it still takes up all of your time.
Right. So, so these are two of the reasons. So you hit exactly the response. They talk about compliance, and complex compliance, and they talked about especially on supplements. It's a very competitive category, and everybody knows about the kind of mess in this space. Although that's getting better. But another thing that they mentioned when we asked them why is that this is the kind of categories where Amazon can just say one day, "Hey, this is
Yep.
not sold anymore on Amazon." When
Yep.
they did that with just the grinder. I'm thinking just this month, this is not sold on Amazon anymore, and they have a feeling that they can just. They won't do that with a kitchen tool, but they may do so with a certain vitamin. I don't know.
Yep.
So that's
That's
also
also why I'm
something that
surprised that
yeah.
baby isn't in that negative category, because we also sell in baby, and the compliance and legal lawsuit, et cetera, insurance compliance cost stuff is so high
Right.
that I'm surprised that
Yes,
baby's
but
such a high.
it's not as complicated as the compliance for food. If
100% agree.
if you
Yeah,
look
that's
at it.
way worse. Yep. The
Yeah,
other thing that I've
yeah.
learned from the baby category is that the lifetime value is just not as good because kids grow up. And so, the
Right,
things that we sell, they outgrow, and they don't, parents don't need them anymore. When you think
right.
of the top categories here, home and garden, pet supplies specifically, personal care stuff. I mean, these are things that, depending on the exact product, um, people need more and more of it. I mean, typically you get a pet, and hopefully you
Right.
have them for 10 plus years, and they have
Yeah.
a tendency to chew through their chew toy or their treats or whatever it is that you're buying or selling. And the lifetime value is incredibly high versus some of these other categories. Fashion, they might buy one thing, they might return it 3 times trying to get the right fit, and then ultimately not even keep it
Right.
at all. The SKU count gets unruly and crazy. So
Yes. Let me add just one thing here that was interesting. Two categories that we found interesting are cosmetics and toys. It's not mentioned here in the short explanation, but um, toys is a category that a lot of buyers don't buy. Even on the survey we see it in the ground on the ground. And when we ask them why, again, they're talking about, they're worried that this product has a short life cycle. That it may be trendy now and in the future it won't. The only toys that most aggregators buy are toys that are definitely evergreen, like a train or something
Right,
that
right.
that you've seen for 40 years and you'll see for many years. And cosmetics was also interesting because many of them said that they won't buy cosmetic and beauty businesses because of the same reasons we talked about, for food and supplements. But then those who do, we feel, at least at Fortunet, we feel that those who do really fight on those businesses because they have recurring customers, and generally once you're a brand, it's hard to become a brand in cosmetics, but once you are, it's a very strong brand, and it grows very fast, and it can get it can go to very significant sales. So that was also very interesting to see. There's the two sides.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely really interesting. Cool. All right, let's move on to the next bullet point here, which is none of the buyers polled are looking to acquire solely wholesale businesses. 63% of the respondents indicated that they purchase only private label brands. 30% are buying primarily private labels.
Yeah. So none of them said we buy only wholesale businesses. If you look again, the main reason, in our opinion, is is basically IP or what you're buying. So when you're buying a private label, you know what you get? You get the trademark, you get the listing with the reviews. It's yours. Somebody comes in, comes on your listing. You can remove them. You can
Yep.
remove hijackers. It's yours. It's your IP. When you buy a wholesale business, let's say you have a kind of license to sell, I don't know, Nike. No, you're a reseller of Nike. You have a nice business of $10 million just reselling Nike. That's great, but what if tomorrow Nike doesn't want you as a reseller?
Yep.
Or what happened? Like, how strong? And then it becomes, the question is, how strong are your contracts? If you have a, I don't know, 10-year contract, and you're the exclusive seller of Nike on Amazon US, that's interesting. That can be interesting. But if it's just a reseller, why do I need why would I pay $9 million or $10 million on your account? I could just do it myself, like
Yep.
resell. There's no, so their main focus now is private label, with exceptions. Again, there are some that could be interesting if it's a major exclusivity, which actually kind of starts to resemble private label for some.
Yep. But
So
even
yeah,
exclusivity can change, right? That's the thing that's really scary. Is like,
yeah,
oh, we made a decision. Some bean counter at the front office is like, we
right,
rather do this ourselves, or we've got some new
right.
partnership that we just made on the golf course, and you're out and they're in, and good luck
Right,
to you.
right,
So,
exactly.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. And then the buyer just paid millions for something that doesn't exist the next day.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So that's why it's tricky. And when they're sold, those businesses are sold for much lower multiples.
Cool. The next one here is actually really surprising to me, which is that 46% of the buyers assert that they require a minimum operating history of 1 year for acquisition targets. 35% require 2 years. 17% do not require any minimum operating history. I
Yeah.
would have expected this to be significantly higher. I know that for the things that we've looked at buying and the things that we have purchased, we want something that has like an absolute minimum of 2 years, but really like to see 3. Otherwise,
Yeah.
I kind of feel like I can go do it on my own. You want to be buying time and all
Right.
the things that someone else has done that you can't go back and recreate without spending 3 or 4 years yourself doing it. And that's what I look at as value. But it's crazy to me that almost 20% of these people like don't even care if it started 6 months ago.
Yeah. So when you ask them and you get into the details, most of them talk about 1 year. they won't say no. They generally don't say no to anything until they checked it. That's basically what they're saying. And they're saying that, yes, in 10 months, sometimes in 10 months, you can get a nice asset there. You can, it really, let's say it really picked up during Christmas, and you can see the beginning of something forming, and the seller has done, saves you time. It does save you time with the production of the product, with the creation of the listing, with the launching of the product, and you start seeing sales and you start seeing profit after 10 months. You have reviews already, so it can become an asset. Again, they do prefer, if you ask them and you get into the details, they do prefer 2 or 3 years. But a business that has, after, I don't know, after a year got to 3,000, 2,000 reviews, and has nice sales and a nice profit, and its trajectory is like that, then it is interesting. It can be interesting. Of course, the multiple can be different. It may be lower.
I would argue that if you got 3,000 reviews in the first 10 months, you're doing something black hat, and that scares me even more.
Yeah, you're doing something black hat.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
All right. So the next one here is, although a profit margin of over 20% is typically deemed desirable, over 50% of buyers said that they require at least a 15% SDE profit margin for FBA businesses, which is a point that we're constantly talking about on this podcast, which is that you got to have margins. If you don't have good, healthy margins, you're just spinning your wheels in the mud. And, this kind of goes to show you that it's a huge turnoff if you don't have at least a 15% net profit. You're not going to be very desirable.
We were expecting that they'll focus on 20 and more, but the most common answer was 15. And I guess it goes again, when we asked them, they said that, sometimes the seller has 15% profit margin, but they think they can do better. So they'll buy it for cheap, right? Because it's based on it's a multiple based on the seller's sales, and then they can improve it. I think that these days, with it's becoming difficult with the shipping cost and the cost of goods that went up. Now it's a little better, but now they're trying to look for maybe higher profit margins, but 15% was the minimum.
Makes sense. All right. Next one here is 65% of respondents require FBA businesses with a minimum purchase price of $500,000 to $1 million, and 52% of the buyers assert that they do not have an upper limit for their transactions. There's always some upper limit.
Yes, minimum and maximum.
Yeah, but the minimum makes sense.
So that was minimum makes sense. You know why? Because of the cost of doing those deals. It takes time and lawyers and there's due diligence costs and so you don't usually, when they start with $500,000 or 200K, $500,000, after a few months we already see them buying businesses of $1 million, $2 million, $5 million.
Yep.
So they have a minimum. If you have a business of less than $1 million, it's very hard to sell it to at least to the kind of aggregator pool.
Yep.
And when we talked about the maximum. It was interesting to see that most of them didn't have a limit. It doesn't mean that they can buy, tomorrow they can buy a 70 million business. It doesn't mean that. But what it means is, and when we asked them, they said, if you show me the right one, I'll raise the money. So they have the funds. The funds are, generally available to them. It's a good period. And so they don't restrict the price. Like, show me the right one and I'll obtain
We'll find the money. These are people that have access to rich friends.
Yes.
Okay. The next one is 90% reply that they either purchase assets only or prefer to purchase the assets only. An asset deal for FBA businesses is far simpler and faster than purchasing stock or the entire company outright.
Correct. Yeah. So when we ask them about that, so clearly most of the transactions today are asset purchase. They buy the trademark, they buy the listing, they buy the account, and they transfer it to them. They don't buy the company. But actually, in the last 6 months, we're starting to see exceptions. If you go to the full question, you'll see the exceptions, and you'll see that when in some cases they'll be open to it. One example is the UK, where in terms of taxes, it was if they sell the assets, they would remain with maybe 50% of the acquisition price. So they don't agree to do any asset sale, and the buyer generally agrees. So many of them now for the UK, all their transactions they purchase the company, the stocks of the company, and when it comes to other countries, they would do an asset deal.
Makes sense. And in the United States, for the most part, these are all pass-through entities, and so it doesn't make a difference. And from a legal perspective, most companies would rather just buy the assets. There is some exceptions around a new rule for like a C corp, where if you have it for X amount of time, I think it's 2 years or more, maybe it's 3 years or more, the tax treatment is significantly more favorable if you sell the whole business. And so there are some exceptions in that realm, but for the most part, most of us are operating under LLCs or S corps that took the S corp election. They're not real S corps, and selling just the assets is a much easier way to go.
Right, and it's faster. So even on the sales side, if it doesn't matter when it comes to taxes, you want an asset purchase because it's just you close much faster, and then the probability of success is higher.
Yep, absolutely. All right, cool. The next on the list here is 61% prefer a full acquisition, while 37% may consider a partial acquisition. Most buyers seem to be confident in their ability to scale the business on their own after a short transition period. I actually am a little surprised by these numbers, although I think it's good that, I thought it was going to be like 90-something% were looking for full acquisitions. I'm happy to see that there are some partial acquisitions. I think that those sales, in my opinion, probably have a better chance of long-term success when the original operator's involved and they aren't disrupting the entire flow. I know a lot of these aggregators have this arrogance of, we can pull all these businesses together and run them all better than any operator ever has, and maybe find out down the road that there's a little bit more to it than that. And if you're doing a partial acquisition or keeping the original owner and talent pool in place, I personally think that that's a better way to go.
So having a partial acquisition doesn't always mean that the seller remains. Sometimes they buy 80%, they leave 20% with the seller, and then the seller. Sometimes it depends on the deal. We have, for the larger deals, sometimes the seller wants to stay with about 20% and then have a second exit in a year based on the numbers, like the 20% based on the same multiple, but the numbers of next year. So sometimes it's just a partial acquisition without the seller. But now again, with larger businesses, they're now more and more asking the sellers if they agree to stay, and if so, for how long. They're trying to get, at least some of them are trying to get the seller on board. But the question was about, are you open to a partial acquisition or not? And I think that if we did this survey 2 years ago, it would be like 95% full acquisition and 5% are open. Now it has changed. So and by the way, we feel it has changed on the seller side. That's our next survey. But sellers 2 years ago, I don't know if you've noticed, but 2-3 years ago, when we asked sellers, would you stay with the buyer? Would you want? They're like, absolutely no. I mean, I'm independent. I work with. Now they see what's happening with the aggregators, and it kind of, they want to be part of it. So it depends on the seller.
All right. So the next question here, or the next result, is around structure. So the preferred structure. Most aggregators offer 70 to 80% cash up front with a deferred or stabilization period to follow by an earnout. This seems to address the seller's desire to cash out, having no control over the future performance of the business, and the buyer's need to mitigate the risk for potential unknowns in the future for that business.
Right. Yeah. So we're seeing that all the time. By the way, the cash up front, they prefer 70. It was a question to the buyers, remember. They prefer 70 to 80% cash up front. It's really up to the seller if the seller agrees to that. if we look at our deals, most of them are about 90% cash upfront, but it really depends on the deal. If you ask them what they prefer 70 to 80. They would prefer 45 or
Right.
60% cash upfront, but they want to make deals, right? So for them, the ideal one, considering their circumstances, considering that they want to be attractive, they're talking about 70-80% cash upfront, and then there's a component of either deferred payment, meaning a payment that you get anyway, or stabilization payment, meaning that it's a payment that you get only if the business didn't go down. Okay. And then on top of that, usually there's some kind of earnout, and the earnout can be 40% of each dollar beyond the current profit. So for example, if your profit in the last 12 months was 1 million, you have 4 million in revenue and 1 million in profit. The next year, we're going to calculate the profit. If it became 2 million instead of 1 million, that million of gap between last year and this year, that million will be divided 40% to the seller and 60% to the buyer. That's just an example. Sometimes it's for 1 year, sometimes it's for 2 years. We've even seen 3 years, which can be interesting. We sometimes see 50-50, half for the seller, half for the buyer of any, again, dollar beyond the current profit. They really want to, the seller to succeed if the business grows. And the seller, on the other hand, wants to get usually as much as they can from upfront cash upfront. So this particular structure is a kind of balance between the two, I believe.
Mm-hmm. Yep. All right, we're coming down the home stretch. There are four left on our list here. So the fourth to last is over 40% of the buyers offer or occasionally offer some sort of equity, like in the parent holding company, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, that's for large deals, basically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we negotiate something like this.
We
when
wouldn't
we did
see
our
that.
deal too.
Yeah. Okay. Good. We don't see that with with a 2 million business, but we're starting to see that with the larger businesses.
Mm-hmm. Okay, third to last. While many sellers assume that sales via omnichannel platforms increase their valuation, most aggregators replied that they do not necessarily value additional sales channels unless they drive significant sales.
Yeah. So that
Shopify
was
is not that
one
important.
thing that. Yes. So we asked them, like, do you offer a higher multiple if the seller has a Shopify business? They said not necessarily. We asked them, do you offer a higher multiple for businesses with retail? Not necessarily. Businesses with eBay and Walmart and other online platforms? Not necessarily. The only one that they said yes, or in most cases, was the next one on the list here, and that was the design patents and patents. So they do value IP.
Yep.
If you have a product that is designed differently, go ahead and register it. It does. We can see how it takes up the valuation of the business, and there's just more demand for those businesses that are a little more than a lookalike, let's say.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense, and I think it's one of the reasons why Color It did sell so quickly and had multiple offers, and we had a ton of IP. It's like really protectable copyright stuff. So either copyrights or patents or any of those types of things, where the buyer knows that they're going to have less risk of copycats coming down the pike, because that is definitely a big issue. It certainly can make your business more valuable. All right. The last one, which this one, I don't know if I believe this or not, but we'll see what happens over the next few years. But most buyers acquire the businesses to hold and grow the brands. Less than 3% answered they buy to flip, i.e. to sell it for a higher price. And I think that we're still in this acquisition phase. I think there's going to be a pulling of all these businesses and a flip, when they sell all of it at once or take it public all at once, and that'll be the way that they get flipped. I agree that they're not trying to individually flip brands. That makes no sense, but these businesses are going to get flipped. I mean, the next big craze that we'll be hearing about in 2 to 3 years will be how XYZ Aggregators just resold their 212 Amazon businesses for XYZ dollars, and that's going to be the headlines we'll be seeing.
Yeah, it's already happening. but it wasn't completed yet. But I can say that the only ones that are flipping individual businesses are actually sellers. We're seeing, and some of them are sellers that have sold their business. Once they're done, they're trying to find some nice smaller businesses,
Yep.
and then they grow them, and then they sell them for a higher multiple. We haven't seen aggregators yet selling individual assets.
Yep. Yep. Awesome. I found all this data to be incredibly fascinating. I want to thank you so much for coming on and taking the time to do it. Just to remind people, if you want to get the report yourself, it's fortunet.net, fortunet.net. Down at the very bottom of the website, in the footer, it says survey report. Click on that, enter your email address. Again, there's like 30 pages here of graphs and charts and a lot more in-depth info that I find to be incredibly valuable. I think there's several things in here that we're going to be discussing internally, how we can leverage this in our own businesses. And again, Yael, thank you so much for coming on and doing this. If people want to get a hold of you or you guys, what's the best way to do that if they want more information from you guys?
It's Yael, Yael, at fortunet.net.
Perfect. And you guys offer services helping people sell their businesses and also doing some legal stuff around that. So if you have any questions about preparing your business for sale and all the IP stuff around that, or also preparing yourself post-sale, making sure that you don't get in any hot water in terms of how you structure your future businesses with other Amazon accounts or whatever you might be doing, they can help with that as well. So definitely reach out. Again, thank you so much for coming on. Have a great day, and hopefully we'll talk to you again in the future when you do your next survey.
Thanks so much for having me. Bye. Bye-bye.